This is Saxophone Talk by Eastman, a show that features many of the prominent saxophonists in the musical scene, with an opportunity to hear their stories, experiences, and challenges that occurred throughout their musical careers. I'm Roger Greenberg, saxophone specialist for Eastman. We're excited to be here with Grammy Award winner and Eastman artist Gary Bias. Gary won the Grammy in 1987 for co-writing Sweet Love with Anita Baker and Louis Johnson. Since 1987, Gary has been the saxophonist with one of the most famous musical groups in modern musical history, Earth, Wind and Fire.
Well, when I was a kid, I just had this love of music. I went through a phase, I think between the age of 9 and 11, of just being attracted to music and music instruments, and I developed a desire to want to play. Didn't really know exactly which instrument I wanted to pick. I started off, I think, in the 6th grade, trying to sign up for the orchestra. I wanted to play violin. It turns out that when I went to sign up, I was a week or two late in signing up, and all the spots were taken. So I wasn't able to start on the violin. I think maybe within a year or so, I ended up gravitating toward the saxophone. I remember telling my parents that I wanted a saxophone. I remember just seeing people play on television on various, variety shows or whatever. And it was just something about the instrument that sounded cool to me, and it looked cool. And it's a funny story. I remember insisting that my parents buy me a tenor saxophone, because somewhere I learned the name tenor saxophone. And they ended up buying me an alto, but oddly enough, that was the instrument I wanted. I was mistakenly thinking that the tenor was an alto. I was calling the alto tenor the whole time, and it turns out they bought me an alto. And I was like, yeah, that's it. They were trying to tell me it's an alto saxophone. I said, no, that's a tenor. And it turns out I was wrong. And but I ended up with the instrument I wanted, and been doing it ever since.
Were your parents musical, or anybody else in your family?
My parents weren't musical. They weren't trained musically. My mom had some natural talent, which she played the piano by ear. She couldn't tell me a note by name, but she can sit down at the piano and play the blues a little bit. And and then my grandmother, my mom's mom, she played the piano. She had some training, and she kind of spurred on my interest in music early. Would just sit me at the piano and show me how to pluck out little melodies and things like that. And she'd leave me, and I'd sit there for hours trying to get it right. But yeah, that's kind of where it all started. And
what kind of music were they exposing you to?
All kinds of stuff. I mean, my grandmother had a wide, taste in music, but, of course, when we sat down, it was just simple melodies, nursery rhymes and things like that. But I remember my grandmother also turned me on, actually before I started playing, to my favorite, who ended up being my favorite alto saxophonist, who's Cannonball Adderley. She played a 45 single of Mercy, 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 which is probably the song he's best known for. It's kind of a pop, jazz tune, and I believe Joe Zawinul wrote that tune and got a Grammy for that back in the 60s. But yeah, they exposed me to all kinds of stuff. But, of course, being an instrumentalist or being interested in a saxophone, instrument like the saxophone, you're going to gravitate toward music that that features that instrument. So, I developed an ear for jazz pretty young, pretty early, 11, 12 years old. I was getting into jazz, Eddie Harris, because that was the sound, that was the instrument I was attracted to. So I'm going to listen to where that instrument is featured,
Yes.
best.
Who were your teachers?
My first teacher, my first saxophone teacher, I remember being introduced to him by a classmate in the 6th grade who played flute. And once he learned I was playing the saxophone, he told me that I got to meet Mr. Hall. Mr. Hall was Milton Hall was the guy in my community who just about everybody who was serious about playing a woodwind instrument ended up studying with at one time or another. I think I started with him when I was 11 and continued studying with him throughout high school, and even a little bit after after I started college and majoring in music. I ended up studying with Victor Morosco in college. I think after my second year, Vic.
Where was that?
That was at Cal State LA, Cal State Los Angeles. Yep. Vic was added to the faculty there, and so I ended up studying with him for about 3 years while there at Cal State LA.
Tell us about those lessons.
Well, those lessons were pretty intense. I mean, Vic is I think, in my opinion, he's a gifted musician, saxophonist, and a fantastic instructor and teacher of the saxophone. One of the first things he did was to we rebuilt my chops. We studied. I've never had instruction on the actual other than the basic stuff, but I'd never had a real full understanding of the embouchure and all the muscles of the face and everything, and your tongue and everything, how everything's tied in, and how to basically have a solid technique for blowing. Most guys just put the horn in their mouth and figured out a way to get sound and go from there. But he started me, and we broke down my chops, made some corrections, and I wasn't too happy about it in the beginning, because of course, once you learn and you once you have your way of doing things, it's uncomfortable to unlearn, old habits,
Yes.
Because you kind of go through a phase where, okay, well, the old way you did things stops working because you're learning a new way, but you don't quite have the new way all the way together. And so I went through a phase there where nothing seemed to feel right, which I wasn't too happy about. But he told me to be patient, stay with it. So, I trusted him. And, after maybe 5-6 months, the new embouchure started to feel natural, and things started to, notes started to pop out a lot better, and pitch started to improve, and, it was just kept going from that point.
Did you have a kind of concept of sound in mind in those days?
Yeah, I naturally had a big full sound always, and I think a lot of that came from my first teacher was old school, and he one of his favorite saxophonists was Johnny Hodges, who played lead alto with the Ellington Band back in the day, Marshall Royal. And he himself, Milton, had a really robust sound, so, that's what I wanted, and so that was my, and then listening to jazz at an early age, I wanted to have that type of approach to developing my sound.
You mentioned Cannonball Adderley and Johnny Hodges. There must have been a number of people who've influenced you over the years.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Contemporary and, and you know, old veterans that have been in the business for decades. You know, I listen to everybody. You know, of course, Charlie Parker and John Coltrane, and you know, all the masters from days prior. And then, you know, of course, once I got to college and decided to major in music, you know, I just, you know, of course, you're going to go back and listen to, you know, guys like Johnny Hodges and, you know, Lester Young and, you know, all those old guys who did so much to, you know, stylistically influence the way saxophone players play and interpretation and things like that. You know, just made a study of it, basically.
How did the tune Sweet Love come about?
Well, that's a long story. Sweet Love started with a for a few years in my early 20s. I was a staff writer along with my writing partner at the time, Lewis Johnson, who is the late Lewis Johnson, who's deceased now. I was a staff writer at Jobet Publishing Company, which is the publishing company for Motown Records, Berry Gordy. And prior to signing on there, Lewis and we put together a few songs that he was writing and producing, and I was trying to do the same thing. We put together a little package of songs, a few of which he had written, a few of which I had written, a few things we had done together to try to get a job, you know, as staff writers. And we ended up getting hired on. But Sweet Love was is a rewrite of the original ballad that I wrote called "With All My Heart," which is the first lyric of the song. And this song was shopped by Jobet, placed with the producer and the artist, Anita Baker. She liked the song, but she wanted to give it a different treatment. So it went from being a ballad to more of a mid-tempo. A lot of lyrics were changed. Most of the melodic material was taken straight from the original. A little bit of lyric. A new bridge written, so it was a rewrite and a true collaboration with Anita, and they recorded it, put it on the record, and that thing ended up blowing up. You know, it was I think it was went to number 2 on Billboard and number 1 in Cashbox. We got the Grammy the following year, but. We got "Sweet Love" was the what did we get? R&B Song of the Year. So that's an award that goes to the songwriters, and so that's how that came about.
When all this started happening, you must have. Were you surprised, or were you? How did you feel about this whole thing?
Well, yeah, I guess we were surprised in a way, because. To be honest, Lewis and I, we thought we were confident that we had, you know, several songs in our little catalog that we'd put together, and we thought that one of our up-tempo songs was going to be the one, you know, would be one of the songs to catch on and get picked up. And we had a couple of things picked up by some smaller artists, but this song. We were kind of surprised, you know, although, I mean, we knew that it was a great song, great lyric, great melody. We didn't know, and, you know, that it was going to blow up like that. I mean, as a matter of fact, I think Anita had only done one solo record prior to this record. And so this album, Rapture, which featured Sweet Love as the first single and ended up being the biggest single from that record, was only her second solo record. So we had no idea the thing was going to go so big. You know, it was a huge, huge single and hit for her. And of course, you know, being one of the writers, you know, was a benefit for me as well, you know. So, yeah.
Of course, it went on to win the Emmy in 1987, and the Grammy, rather.
Grammy, yes.
And obviously, it was a great thrill for you personally. Did it also change your thoughts on what you wanted to do with your future career?
I wouldn't say it changed my thoughts. It just gave me, it just opened up my horizons. It just gave me an idea that, well, I can, because, my first love was playing, of course. The saxophone was my first love. Writing also is a love of mine, but I had no thoughts to, for instance, give up playing to become just a writer or producer. I wanted to continue to do both, and good thing I did, because I think a couple of years after, actually, Sweet Love was actually released as a single in 1985, and it blew up in 1986, and of course we got the Grammy in 1987. But later in 1987, I also auditioned for Earth, Wind & Fire. And I've been with them ever since. So, it was a good thing that I wasn't swayed to give up playing just to write or,
So you actually took an audition with Earth, Wind & Fire. What were the circumstances around that? How did that come about?
Okay, well, of course, Earth, Wind & Fire, being that I graduated from high school in 1975. That was probably the pinnacle of Earth, Wind & Fire's, record success. So I was a big fan. I was a big fan of Earth, Wind & Fire in 1975. I was very disappointed upon hearing that they disbanded. I think it was 1981, 1982. They disbanded. I was about done with college then. It was a big disappointment, but it turned out to be a blessing, because in 1987, when it was decided they were going to put the band back together, the old horn section had moved on. They were touring with Phil Collins at the time, so they needed a new horn section. And
why did they disband?
I don't know all the details to that, but I do know that when they did break the group up, it was pretty much Maurice White's decision, who's of course, the founder of the group, that he wanted to move on and do other things, and they had a pretty much a 10-year run of touring and everything, and he wanted to move on and produce other artists and do his solo act. And, it was kind of I don't think everybody at the time, from what I hear, was too happy about the fact that the group was going to break up. But, those things happen.
Mm-hmm. But you were talking then about the horn section moved on.
Yeah, the horn section, of course they moved on. So when, I think 5-6 years gone by, Maurice decided he was going to put the band back together. So they had to find some new horn players. The other guys weren't available, and the word got out. As a matter of fact, Reggie Young, the trombonist, got word through, I believe it was George Bohannon, who's a trombonist who played on many of the records, on many of the Earth, Wind & Fire records, and it's the guy that Reggie used to study with. He got word that they were putting a band together, and they were looking for a horn section, so he was recommended to go in and audition. And Reggie called me and said, "Hey, you want to go in and audition for Earth, Wind & Fire?" And I said, "Are you kidding me? Of course." And so we went down and auditioned. There was actually 3 of us. There was another guy, a trumpet player, and out of the 3 of us, they liked Reggie and I. So they wanted a 3-piece horn section, so they had 2/3 of the section at that point once they picked us. And they ended up bringing in, a couple of weeks later, Ray Brown, played trumpet for maybe 14, 15 years with the group, no longer with the group, but oddly enough, the 3 of us went to the same high school, and we ended up being the new section, the new Earth, Wind & Fire horn section. Not to be confused with the prior section, who was known as the Phoenix Horns. We ended up being in the horn section together, high school, same, from same high school for 14, 15 years. And then Ray left, had some health issues that caused him to, put the horn down, actually. And he was replaced by Bobby Burns, who's the trumpet player with us now. I think Bobby's been with us since 2004. So he's been there about 13 years.
Long time that you've been with the group.
Yeah, 30 years. 30 years.
This is kind of an amazing fact that it's a group that sold over 100 million records. It's one of the world's best-selling bands of all time. Some of the descriptions of Earth, Wind & Fire's music use words like jazz, rock, funk, soul, pop, rhythm and blues. Talk about how all of these different musical styles have found a way into Earth, Wind & Fire.
Okay, yeah, that's very interesting. That's what makes playing with Earth, Wind & Fire so much fun, and even after 30 years, it makes it so interesting. I think the songbook, the Earth, Wind & Fire songbook, is probably one of the best songbooks out there anywhere compared to any artist, any group that you can come up with. But one of the things that a lot of people don't realize is that the founder of Earth, Wind & Fire, Maurice White, who's had a great career as a drummer for Ramsey Lewis. So this is a guy whose background was heavily influenced with jazz, played in a very popular and successful jazz group for many years with Ramsey. And so, the concept of Earth, Wind & Fire's music, through Maurice White, always had those roots, those jazz roots. He was also a session drummer in Chicago. Maurice was, yeah. Did a lot of stuff for Chess Records and played on a lot of blues albums, and I think he played on dozens and dozens of sessions for Chess Records. So, he always had those elements in his musical approach. The jazz, the soul, the rhythm and blues, all combined together. So it makes it a lot of fun because, particularly as a horn player, playing in more of a popular music scenario, we get to show out a lot. The horn parts are very intricate, harmonically and rhythmically. A lot of the parts are pretty challenging. So it makes a lot of fun. You see a lot of times in situations where guys are in pop groups or whatever, there may be a sax player there and it doesn't have a lot to do. You might get 8-bar solo on every third song or something like that, and maybe he has to double on keys or something else just to be involved. But with this band, the horns and the guitars particularly are right in your face. There's a lot to do. There's a lot of excitement in the music, and it just makes it a lot of fun.
The horn section has always in this group been an integral part of the
absolutely
the overall sound.
Absolutely. It's from that era. You had Tower Power and Earth, Wind & Fire. Probably the most influential bands in terms of how upfront and involved the horns are, in the overall sound. And of course, being a saxophone player, you're going to be, growing up in that era, you're going to listen and you're going to want to involve yourself with these types of songs. I was playing in bands. I played in bands prior to auditioning with Earth, Wind & Fire, and and played several of the songs. And that ended up being a great aid to me when I auditioned, because they didn't have any charts there for us to play. They just, the rhythm section was there. They wanted to know they just wanted us to jam with the rhythm section. They played some of the tunes, and Reggie and I we just jumped right on the parts that we knew from playing with bands for years, and that made a difference. It made a difference in the end.
Were there any particular artists who influenced Earth, Wind and Fire?
Yeah, I think, just from having conversations and reading his autobiography, of course, Maurice, he was influenced by a lot of people: Sly Stone, James Brown, many jazz artists, Coltrane, Miles Davis, definitely. He had wide taste in music, and he spoke of that quite a bit. Yeah.
Every time you play a concert with Earth, Wind and Fire, you're playing before many thousands of fans, some of whom have been fans of the group since its inception in 1971. Having been to an Earth, Wind and Fire concert myself, the audience reception was, for lack of a better word, explosive. Does this continue to be thrilling to you and the band as performers?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, after, being with the band for 30 years, and, if you think about the guys, the original guys that are still there, they've been doing it for like over 45 years, you gotta, it's the same music. I mean, most of what people want to hear are the hits from that 70s era, although the band went on and, released music after that, the 80s and the 90s, even in, after 2000. But, most of what people come to hear and what they request and what they want to hear is from the 70s. So, of course, what keeps you going is the excitement that you draw from the audience, and, we'll see families out there. We do meet and greets after all the shows, and we meet families and people, and we see 3 generations of fans. We'll see like the grandparents, the parents, and the grandkids, all of whom are fans, all of whom know the lyrics. I mean, we'll see people in the front row where the little kids are singing the lyrics, they know every word. The parents are there, and the grandparents are there. 'Cause, I mean, you got to think about the Earth, Wind & Fire has been around over 45 years. The guys, the original guys that are still with the band are in their mid-60s. Maurice was 10 years older than them. So their contemporaries, our contemporaries are, a lot of which are our grandparents now. So you got 3 generations, literally 3 generations of fans. And it's pretty unique, I think. Pretty unique, and, it's fun to see.
What's it like being on the road with Earth, Wind and Fire?
It's a lot of fun. I mean, one thing I can say about working with Earth, Wind & Fire all these years is, they've always put together a collective of people in the organization who are great to work with, professional, just good people. We have a lot of fun. We have a lot of laughs. We do a lot of dates every year, so we spend a lot of time together, out there on the road, traveling on the tour bus, going from city to city. And, it's just a lot of fun, It gets busy out there sometimes, we'll have weeks where we're doing 5 shows in a week in different cities. That gets hard. And then there's other times when, schedule's not so tough, and we'll park one place and do 3 shows in one city, and have a couple of days off, and so we'll be stationary for a little bit, and that takes some of the edge off, when you can sit in one place for a few days. But whatever it is, no matter how busy it gets, we just keep each other entertained, a lot of jokes. Gags, it's it's like a ball team being on the road almost. You're together so much that after a while you just you do whatever you can just to stay entertained. So yeah, it's a great time. Fortunately, it's a great organization to work for. Can't complain. Can't complain.
As a composer, you continue to compose, and have you written songs for Earth, Wind, and Fire?
I haven't written anything for Earth, Wind, and Fire. I wouldn't want to say it was a composition, but there's one record. I forget what record it was, but there's a tune. Actually, it's just solo saxophone. It's an interlude. It's just me, and we called it Bird. And that was featured on one of the records back around somewhere in the 90s, in the early 90s. I don't remember if it was Millennium or Heritage, one of those records. But that's the only thing, that I quote unquote pen for Earth, Wind, and Fire. Anita Baker, "The Sweet Love" is the song everybody knows. I've done some jazz stuff. Billy Higgins was a very famous jazz drummer. I wrote a few things for him way back in the 90s.
Is that a straight ahead style?
Yeah, straight ahead stuff. Yeah, it's on a record called Mr. Billy Higgins.
Instrumental.
Instrumental, all instrumental. Yeah, I think it was quartet. Billy Higgins Quartet. Mr. Billy Higgins is the record. I think I wrote 3 tunes on that one. Morning's Awakening, one called Humility, and another called East Side Stomp. But that's a straight ahead record. Mm-hmm. And then, did some solo stuff of my own independently as well.
You've recorded albums as a soloist under your own name. Tell us about
Okay,
these.
Sure. The first record I did as a soloist was a record I did for a little small label called Nimbus Records. And this was back in, I was 22, I believe. And this is a straight ahead record. It's called East 101. Probably couldn't find it if you tried. It's very hard to find. I think there's a few copies still out there available. As a matter of fact, I think they may have even, of course, back then it was only available on LP. I think they've released it on CD that you could maybe find if you look hard enough on the internet. But yeah, that was East 101. I released another record right around 1999, that was called To Be Free. And that was a solo record that I put out on my own label, Thunderbop Records. And that one you can probably find online. I think CD Baby and Amazon.com, you can find that on there. And then most recently released a single, which I'm pretty excited about, following up. And this is called Under the Moon and Over the Sky, which is an instrumental cover of a song recorded by Angela Bofield back, I believe, in 1979. One of my favorite songs ever. And so we did a instrumental version of that, and that's available for download. You can find that anywhere if you type in any of the download sites, Amazon, CD Baby, iTunes. Type in Gary Bias and Under the Moon and Over the Sky, and you'll find that. That one I really love because I was able to incorporate a full string section for enhancing the track, and you did pretty much the same arrangement from the original on Angela's album, and it came out really nice. Came out really nice, in my opinion.
You're working on a new album as well?
Yeah, well, these days, a lot of particularly independent artists aren't necessarily releasing quote unquote albums. A lot of people are doing EPs, or they're releasing singles, and then they combine the singles, package them later. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to release a series of digital 45s, where there'll be a download of 2 songs. And then once I got enough of those out there, I'm going to combine them into an album as well, into a CD. And then, of course, the individual tracks will be available for individual downloads. So I think we're going to take that approach now. That's more suited to these times anyway.
You obviously have a busy musical life beside still playing with Earth, Wind, and Fire and your solo things. What else is in the future for Gary Bias?
Well, I'm just going to continue doing what I do as long as I can do it. I love to play. I love touring. And I love writing and producing. I'm going to continue to try to do some independent work and some independent releases, and continue with Earth, Wind, and Fire as long as that continues to go. I'm going to, ride that train till the wheels fall off. But yeah, I'm just going to, continue to, do what we love. I got into music for the love of it, and I still love it, still passionate about it. And so I'm going to stay with it as long as my health holds up, and as long as I continue to be inspired, I'm going to continue to stick with it.
You're playing Eastman 52nd Street saxophones. Would you talk about how you came across the Eastman saxophones and what was attractive about them?
Well, yeah, absolutely. I'm playing the 52nds. I love them. It's a very unique instrument. I remember meeting you and Ralph Torres at the NAMM show one year. I guess it was maybe almost 5 years ago. It'll be 5 years from this one, I believe. And I remember walking up. I think it was almost closing time too. I remember walking up. I had been to several booths and tried, mouthpieces and instruments and flutes and, different things. And I remember seeing the Eastman booth, and I remember saying, let me give this horn a try. And walked up and met you and Ralph, and picked the horn up. And after playing a few notes, I was convinced that, this instrument was definitely a unique instrument, and it was something I wanted to get familiar with. I was just impressed by the response. I was impressed by the full, robust sound. It was something, that definitely appealed to me because of, playing with a band like Earth, Wind, and Fire, where there's 2 guitar players and amplified drums and keys and bass and 4 or 5 singers at a time. You got all that sound. I needed an instrument that was going to be big, that had, but not just big. I mean, I also like the complexity of the tone. And it had everything I wanted. It had enough edge. It had enough complexity. It was full. It was big. It had a good scale. And I was like, yeah, I think I want to check this horn out a little bit more. And the rest is history. I think we met. I think I came down here to Eastman a couple of weeks later to try some more horns out, and it was a done deal after that. It was a done deal.
And then you actually wound up using the horns on a concert.
Absolutely, yeah. I think it was maybe within a few weeks we had a local concert, somewhat local anyway, at Paula Casino in Paula, and I remember inviting you and Ralph to the show, and I think it was maybe within a week after getting the horns, and I played the horns that show and been playing them in every show ever since. They work fantastic. They definitely are great instruments, and I love them.
Gary, thanks for being with us today.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me down.